Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am so happy to be here with you and my esteemed friends, colleagues, and these are the best of the best. I mean, we have a little bit of time, so there's a lot to cover, and we'll just get at it. So I think we're here in this wonderful show where you have the opportunity to actually see and touch and talk to people. So I want to know what we're trying to get at today is like the inner thoughts of each of these designers. So I'd love to ask each of you, what do you look forward to at this show particularly? And what kind of surprises? Are there any dealers you especially look for? What are the sort of takeaways that you can share with us about the show? And I'll just go down. Well, Corey.
Hi. You guys look amazing, by the way. Thanks so much for being here with us this afternoon. I think when I come to these shows, and for the winter show in particular, I think the big thing is finding something that our clients have not seen before. Our clients love provenance. They love stories. They love things that are unusual, that are off the beaten path, that will give their homes, their interiors, an edge. And so we want to find those pieces. We want to hunt for those items that will give the project a certain layer of provenance. So anything that catches our eye, neoclassical, modern, whatever it might be, that's what we want to get project. Little extra twist.
Peter, what do you look for?
I mean, I see every object here, every painting. It has to be extraordinary for everyone to, taking the trouble to bring it here. It's an incredible venue, and it's all been vetted. So I like to be surprised by what the dealers have done. And the dealers are bringing, decades of knowledge, and they're as excited as we are. So I think the stories, as Corey said, are interesting. I mean, there are specific dealers. I love to go back to the old print shop and visit Martin Lewis, who did those amazing drawings and etchings of New York, which are it could only happen in New York. I love Cove Landing and seeing their taste and their treen and objects and furniture. And then I like to be surprised. I mean, there's an incredible Maurice Prendergast out there. There's a Sargent, and you're in this intimate setting, and suddenly you're looking at something absolutely exceptional.
Ellen?
I think that I always look for something that I love this show because there's so much depth of knowledge. And I'm always looking for the thing where I see a dealer or an object where I say it's like a half an inch wide and 7 miles deep. And I really felt that way about the maps. And I think that you look at it, it's just, as a decorator, you're not thinking about maps. But yet your history and all that. And then all of a sudden it's like, this is extraordinary. And I think it's those moments and those teaching moments and learning moments that make me keep coming back and being fascinated every time.
I think discovery, and surprise. And I think that, I don't know if the other people up here, but a lot of our job involves planning and drawings and kind of specificity around it. And I think that there's like a wonder aspect to being here, and it activates that sort of the creative part of not only from the actual objects themselves, but then the stories behind them. I mean, and the breadth of work, from Nakashima's first chair that is like the exact same as the Charlotte Perriand, to Richard Rogers, the prototype for the Pompidou table that's right at the end. If nobody's seen it, it's the most extraordinary object. And, and Clinton Howell has like some incredible like English Rococo things. Like these are the building blocks. And I think that, yes, you can formulate a design, but this is really for the collector, client, project in the house that wants to not just acquire for function, but acquire for the idea of what it is to be a collector and to have a collection of objects speak to each other.
Doctor?
You a doctor?
I'm twice doctor.
Honorary, or did you earn it?
I did not.
I earned it, baby. Just not with knowledge.
Oh, with time in the
Yes, I like to say twice the degree, half the education. I think there are layers of meaning to this show. The first one, personal. This is right in the heart of New York, even if, no matter where you live, as I live under a bridge. But it's the heart of where I'd like to live. But it's very meaningful to me. I've been coming for a long time. The dealers have become dear friends. I get sucked into Cove Landing every goddamn time I'm here. I am the proud owner of a helmet, a small metal helmet. Darn it. I once went to Daniel Crouch, and I do look at maps. And they had that wall of Paris maps. And, I usually do not come here looking for myself. I mean, this is something else. And there ensued an emergency 911 phone call to my husband. And he had to run here and look at the maps. And we bought them. And we have never hung them because they require 12-foot ceilings. But we will. I will be buried with those maps.
I could build you a house with a 12-foot ceiling.
So I have a question, and you don't have to. We don't have to go in a line. You can all jump in whenever you feel like it. But here's the big question. I think one thing to point out, which we all love, is that all the dealers, all the people, professionals here in their booths, are dying to talk to you. So really remember that, because I know I still am intimidated to ask questions, but I always do, and then find the most delightful and meaningful conversations, and I learn so much, and they love to talk. So just to let that know. Here's the question I have. If you have a very modern space, how do you integrate antiques or older pieces into that space, and then vice versa? What will enliven a room either way? And Peter, I think of you when I ask that question, because your spaces, your houses are beautifully classical, and yet they have, I know that you work with Katie and you work with different designers, but you also have your own aesthetic about what goes with what or what doesn't go with what, which might be a nice surprise.
Sure. I mean, I think you don't need to be so concerned about, a painting fitting within a panel, for example. I mean, one of my favorite rooms I've ever done is, has a huge George III mirror that's gilded, and it sits over the stile between two panels, and it's just wonderful. And it feels like that kind of layering you get in an old house. It's just the way I feel. I'm not an architect who minds if you put a tree right in front of the facade. I think layers are good. So, and I also think that an old house with contemporary art it can be very interesting and lovely and mixing up. I remember seeing the artist George Condo's house, and he has his pictures, and then he has a great portrait that looks like Joshua Reynolds right next to it. And Andy Warhol's, we all learned from these New Yorkers. Andy Warhol's house was like that. It's layering. You don't need to worry about whether it's contemporary or not.
I'd say it's study the architecture the same way you'd study the furniture, and then see if they have a dialogue. I think you can have a George III like thing sitting in a very modern space, but there's molding on that piece of furniture.
Right.
And are you in, not to knock anything, but are you in a new space where that molding was at all thought about, or is it those are the things. If there's no molding, maybe it will be a wonderful contrast, but you can't. I think you have to really look. I mean, Peter, you can talk about this, but I think you have to really look at your walls. People don't actually study their walls.
And in New York, where a lot of the apartments have no moldings, perhaps, what a great thing to bring in through your furniture. So it's the portable pieces that bring history, context, grounding, and it alleviates the immediate need to have it all baked in the cake.
And I think our human family is going through a real metamorphosis as it pertains to how we perceive ourselves in our homes, and we're really due for that shift. We had about 20 years of beige and gray and cream. And before that was mauve and mauve, forest green and whatnot. And so now it's time to switch again, right? And I think that if we learned anything from being exposed with the pandemic and having shut in with our homes, we got a chance to look at how we live. We realized that I have the same sofa as my sister-in-law or the same table as my neighbor down the street. Now people they're done with homogeneity. They want more individuality. They want more independence to create. And so when you come to shows like this and when you're searching and hunting for antiquity, it gives you the opportunity to take something that no one else has or that very few people have and mix it into your interiors and in your environments for that special, unique layer that says, this is who I am. And sometimes if great Aunt Ethel passes away and leaves behind a Louis XVI credenza that's not really your style, but it would be sacrilegious to not take the credenza because your mother will kill you, right? You have to figure out a way to embrace that independence and to work that element into your home, and it becomes modern because it's today. You use your fine china every day, not just for Christmas and Thanksgiving and other holidays, but you embrace all these beautiful antiquity elements every single day, and that makes you unique, and that's why these shows are so important.
I love that you mentioned this idea of not saving things for occasions. Like wear your jewelry and use your beautiful china, use your silver, because life is short. And also you should just celebrate the most beautiful things in your life. And as I always say, your home is the only place you have control. You don't have control over anything else, but at home you have some control. So
You don't live in my home.
not in your home. Of course, I should have mentioned that. But let me ask you this. When you are starting a project, let's say people here, including myself, are moving into a new space, where do you begin? Do you have a sort of formula like you start with the carpet or you start with the color of the walls? Or is it project to project? Where does one begin a project? Peter, where do you begin?
Well, I was just telling Allison and Punch that one project started with the client's request that the living room wall accommodate the world's biggest painting of King Kong. By the way, on a really bad day, he's crying. And it's Walton Ford. And it's like, oh my God, this is 10 by 12. Well, that means I'm going to give you a big double height room. And then that leads to other things in the house. So, the house started with a Walton Ford.
I might back that up and say the starter with your client. It all starts with the client.
Starts with your client and what your client wants. Well, let's say you're your own client, and let's say you're doing it like, Ellen, where would you suggest to someone if you're working with someone for the first time, and that person says, well, what do we do? Like you're in a bare room. What do you say?
Well, there's so many layers to it. I'm going to put the architectural and space planning questions to the side and approach the question from a purely decorative point of view. As a decorator, what do you do? And I always say that every project has a pulse. And the process of discovery that you go through with the client to find out what that pulse is, what makes them happy. And to me, that's the biggest challenge, because it's not something that people could articulate easily, or they wouldn't hire a decorator. They'd just do it themselves. So it's that moment where you're solving a problem and you bring all of your knowledge of your past experience in decorative arts to that question. And for me, that's the single most exciting moment in a project, figuring out that puzzle. So there's no way for me to describe it to you. I wish I could. It's kind of very intuitive and personal with the client.
It's why it takes so much humility to be a designer and decorator. You really have to check your ego at the door. It's not about you. And I think sometimes as designers, especially those who are very successful, the goal is to create a brand and to become known for something. But what you really want to become known for is articulating your client's vision. It's like putting on a pair of glasses. I can see what I see, but I have to put on my client's glasses and see what they see. And sometimes I don't like what I see when I put on my client's glasses. But my job is to at least try to see something that will work, and it starts with them, sitting down on the chaise lounge in our office and telling us all their problems in therapy sessions, and then being humble enough to say, okay, I really think you should do sapphire blue and emerald, and you really want to do beige and cream, and we will make beige and cream work.
And I think that I agree with everything everyone said, and that it's really about if it's either the place or the person, is what is the story that exists and what is the story that you want to exist? Is it, are you buying someplace that has history where you're doing that, or you might have come from a family that has like a very strong aesthetic standpoint and you've inherited all these things, or you come to the table with nothing, and and it's about figuring out okay, what's your taste, but also what are your values around this? Do you want to be a collector? Do you find that term wildly pretentious? I'm from Burlington, Vermont, which is very anti-aesthetic of any kind. It's a very hard thing to even talk about because people don't even want to talk about it. But they have to live with a sofa, so it's it's to a lot of really ugly houses.
Is there such a thing? The fashion world, I think, the fashion and design reflect our culture like nothing else. It's like the immediate sort of mirror for all of us, what's going on. Is there such a thing as things not working? Because there's a lot of emphasis on, everything goes now. Eclectic. I'm guilty of it too. But are there still things that you have to be careful about that do not work? Billing, what are those?
Or in the wrong hands, the world of interiors should be burned, it's not it's very hard to marry a Rococo dresser in a, 1930s sheds. You should, that's knowing your story, knowing your ability, your bandwidth.
So in other words, dressing, the best dressing is dressing when you know yourself. So when your room is also reflecting you knowing yourself or trying to be someone maybe you're not.
So I don't think my interiors reflect me at all because, the ones in my house, because they're far more formal and pulled together, and I'm a complete spaz in them. However, they make me happy. So there is part of that. Yes, it should reflect you, but it's also, this is where you live, and yes, things can be wrong, but you should derive pleasure from these things. And side note about the pieces we're seeing here at the show, and this is a hard, this is a handbrake turn. These pieces, we all look on the internet all day long and we all see what's out there. We love seeing it. It's so much fun. And I think we're all very addicted to looking because it's a pastime. But when an antique dealer publishes something on the internet, it is quote unquote burned, meaning the price has been published and they can never change that price again. But you come to the New York Winter Antique Show, you have to pay a certain cost to get it here, to get your booth, so these dealers have brought their most special pieces that have not been published. And the reason to come here and look at these things and to think about them for yourself is that they are so unique. You can't just troll sites and find them. They're very special, most beloved pieces that they've saved for us. And we can interact with them and have, my Paris maps, where it just galvanizes you and you come home and you have something that might reflect you, it might not reflect you, but it engaged you very much.
That is such a beautiful point, and that's such a good point, and that should be so exciting before you go into the whole beautiful armory to look at these pieces and to discuss with the dealers. If someone is a collector, not yet a collector, shall we say, coming to this show, is there something you could, and they say, Corey or Peter, what do I do? Where do I begin here? What would you say to them?
There's nothing wrong with just love at first sight, just finding something that you love the look of. You don't have to learn the story to teach yourself to like it. And so there are no rules in that sense. And just something that if you brought it home and put it on a table, it would feel right. It would feel good. And all of this, populates rooms. As architects, we make renderings, and the renderings without furniture look, kind of sad. So I tell people we have to populate every room. And we do virtual renderings. And then I was told we have to actually buy virtual books to put on the virtual bookshelves. But yes, you want to complete things, right?
And it's also good to really be mindful of the fact that not everything, it's better to have one special, wonderful piece that you've invested in yourself to bring into your personal estate than to have a whole estate full of junk. So I always encourage clients, especially my younger clients who are coming into themselves, into their worlds, into their orbits, invest wisely. And they'll say, well, shouldn't we just do this and should we do that? And why aren't you working this deal and getting me a better price on this? And I always tell them, my job is not to save you money. My job is to help you spend your money wisely. That's the designer's job, is to help you spend your money wisely. So if we have a budget and this is the toy box, many of us as children had a toy box and our job was to put our toys away. If you have a lid on the box and you put all your big Tonka trucks and your big, superhero and Transformers and GoBots, whatever we had in the 80s, and you put them in first, and then you try to put the little small Matchbox cars and the other little items, the toy box always had a hard time closing if you put the small toys in first and then the big toys on top. Whenever you put the big toys in the box first, it's amazing how every small item just finds a nook and cranny to kind of nestle into, and the lid closes. So when you're doing a design for a space, pick out the big investment pieces, invest properly. Those are the big toys that go into the box. And then you stick to that, and then look at what's left in your budget as far as your investment for the rest of the project. And you add to that. And it's so much better because in the toy box lid, it closes and your rooms are complete.
And if you're looking for storage, this is just sort of basic from an architect's point of view. Millwork is so expensive that it's very often the case that a built-in is actually more money than buying a beautiful antique. And people say, well, my daughter will abuse it. If they're young, my son will bang it up. And I say, well, it's actually been around for 220 years. And it's encountered a few 10-year-olds, and the drawers still work. So, and those pieces give more character than what built-ins by an architect can do, frankly.
I just bought my coat closet is from Doyle, and it was it's from 1775, and it was less money than a Crate and Barrel chest. It's really wild, and I think maybe counter to some of the things I've said, this should be the most joyful center of your life. Like there's no way to screw this up unless you're maybe getting yourself into financial trouble. But there's no, if you love it and it's something that brings you joy, there's no wrong,
Ellen, well, I just love what Peter said about the age of things. I think that these things have survived revolutions, wars. There's a terrific piece at Thomas Henage that's the Dauphine, the young Dauphine. It was his toy box, as talking about toy boxes. And in the iconography of the, the binding, it tells the story of the Dutch-French wars. And it's like, I was listening to this and it's just so that these things have survived so much longer than any of us. And I think that deserves respect and a moment of acknowledgement about that.
And they're sustainable. I mean, these are pieces that you pass on, that you're inheriting, you're enjoying again. They will be passed on somehow. So there's a sustainability. Before I open the floor to all of you, I'll just ask one last question. Where do you go for your sources of inspiration? Where do you What's your go-to when you're thinking, I just need to get out of the office, get out of the clients, and here's what I need to do for myself? Where is that inspiration? Where do you go? What do you think about? What do you do? What do you look at?
Start with you. Well, inspiration isn't always on tap. You can't always say, okay, I need it right now. Which allows me to say what I wanted to say before. So I'm going to seg into inspiration comes with due time, as does collecting. See how I did that? Collecting is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and which is a lovely thing because you can start slow. You don't need to gulp, and it's not just money, it's time, and you can take your time and you can do it little by little. And inspiration, sometimes you just need to sit with it. But of course, the real place I go to for inspiration is I look at the works of other people whose work I admire, and I, it's not arbitrary choices that they're making. They're making considered choices and informed choices and looking at their interiors and the mixes of things and what is historic, what's not historic, what context they're creating, what I can intuit from looking at it. What could be more interesting?
You couldn't agree more. Yeah. Billy.
I mean, I think since we're here and I'm looking at Louis Boffering, that it was a great dealer and provides so much knowledge and inspiration, like that if I need to get away from the computer, that it's about coming to a show here, going to shows in your, I love the hunt. That's where a lot of ideas come from. And, my library too, and I was thinking as we were talking about this, like people who mix modern and old, like Anuska Hempel, like I look at that work all the time. Is it reflected exactly in my work? Probably not. You wouldn't know that, but I'm obsessed with her, and I think that she achieves with such skill, and I can look at those images and somehow I'll find some detail every time that I think, I can't believe she thought that way.
I like going to the flower district because when I'm looking for fresh new color schemes that are off the beaten path, I look at nature and I feel like if God can put together, or whatever you might believe in, can put together a beautiful cornucopia of color with this flower, this particular color combination, if it works so beautifully in nature, chances are it will work pretty well in the interior of a client's home. And then the haute couture fashion runway. I love seeing how the different fashion designers put things together on their models, because in a year or two, we'll take those same textiles and put them on drapes. So I love the synergy of the fashion world. Yeah.
Well, I know time is running out, and I'd love to open the floor to you and questions for these amazing talents. So speak now, because they're going to disappear. Yes.
Well, it'll be would love to see your region, but will be kind of the piece that got away free. It would be so interesting to know what all the something you saw in the new blog. Let's you bought the map. You're very very using some that others did not. What was the piece that you saw? Did it grab? Whether it's somebody inboundedly fair or in a dealer or at a great fair, was somebody that still haunts you to this day.
I have a painting of the treetops of Paris that was by a Japanese artist, and it was in an auction catalog for a Grand Dame, and I can't remember what Grand Dame it was for, but it was amazing, and it was $5,000, and it was just a bridge too far, whenever this was, and still I can't find out who that artist was, and it was so misty and modern and unframed, and
it does haunt you, those things.
It does. It's a bummer.
I have I know it like comes right up, because it's a paneled room that was a Tudor paneled room that was English and that was in a estate that was being demolished in Pennsylvania. and it was some small thing, and the proportions of it were perfect, and it had all the doors, everything was seamless, it had all the hardware. It was like, I mean, I didn't even have a place for it, but it was like the perfect object, and I screwed up the date. And I tried calling him, I tried tracking down the person who bought it, and just
Might come back. You might see it somewhere else.
you know, that happened. It happened to me at Parma. I had a picture and I took it and I even posted it on my Instagram. And then 5 years later, the dealer had the same cabinet. And
Never give up, ever.
Like market several years ago at the Antique Center there, and there was this fabulous 1920s brass trolley, and I swear this thing was calling my name. It was like, Corey, and I kept walking by it, and it was just so beautiful, but I had to take a client call, and or it may have been a contractor, but I had to take a phone call, and I said, this will be here, the show just opened, and I'm only stepping away for a few minutes. Well, the call ended up being like 20 minutes. And I come back to the dealer just to inquire about, shipping costs and, secure it for myself. And someone had rolled off with the trolley, and it was just rolling down High Point someplace. So I got another one eventually, but it's like a first love type situation. There's always that first love. So not all trolleys are made equal, and that one was really special.
It was a garden gate designed by Billy Delano for his own garden, and it had the lovely spade and rake all built into it, and it was just a beautiful piece of wrought iron, and it was just a few dollars too much, and there was no actual place in Katie's garden for it. But then the next week I found that my client had bought it for her garden, the house I designed. That was weird.
Upstate. Anything else? Burning questions before you go out?
My most recent one was in Parma. There were these heroic Sicilian Baroque wall sconces. And I thought, I don't know anybody who wants them, but I want them. And I waited to the last day, and they were hard to find, and I went back and they were gone. And I think the next time I see 36-inch high Baroque Sicilian ceramics, I will buy them.
Well, thank you all for being with us, and thank our amazing talents here, the best of the best.